Hi. Welcome, everyone, who I can't see, but I know you're there. My name is Leah Getchell, and I'm the Patient Partnerships and Training Lead for the Can-SOLVE CKD Network. And I'm really grateful that you're here and appreciate so much the time that you've taken out of your day to join us live. And hello, and thank you to all those who are catching and recording. And in particular, thank you so much for the folks from the National Training Entity for gathering us all in this way to share all that we've done with one another. That's really exciting. We're really excited to share the Can-SOLVE CKD Learning Tree with you over the next hour. But before we get started, I'd like to pass it over to my colleague, Craig Settee.
Great, thank you a lot, Leah. Just making sure everybody can see me okay and hear me okay. Awesome. Welcome everybody today to our session. My name is Craig Settee. I'm the Manager of Cultural Competency here at the Can-SOLVE CKD Network. And I want to start us off by just acknowledging that our Can-SOLVE CKD offices are located on the traditional unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, home of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish First Nations. And in addition to that, just want to acknowledge as well that I know many of you are joining us from across the country, and acknowledge that the territories that you're all joining our session today from. So with that, I will say miigwech, and I will pass it back to Leah.
Awesome, thanks, Craig. So I'm here in London, Ontario, which is the traditional home of the Haudenosaunee, the Lenape and the Chidokta nations, Anishinaabe, excuse me, as well. And so I really wanted to just give you a quick oversight of what we're going to do today. So we're going to just give those who don't know so much about Can-SOLVE a little overview about what our network is about. And then we're going to talk through each of our learning branches really quickly, and then really open it up for some conversation and questions. If at any time you have questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to use the Q&A box at the bottom or raise your hand during our discussion section. So let's start. So the goal of our session today is to really help you understand the inspiration and the process for developing the learning tree, to understand the goals of each of our branches, and hopefully help you figure out a way that you can incorporate some of this into your own work. So the Can-SOLVE CKD Network is one of 5 chronic disease networks here in Canada, and we were established back in 2016 in phase 1 through the Canadian Institutes of Health Research National Strategy for Patient-Oriented Research, SPOR. We are a pan-Canadian patient-oriented research network that brings together all the stakeholders: patients, researchers, policymakers, caregivers, donors. We cover urban, rural, remote. We have a whole circle of Indigenous folks who help guide us in our work, many diverse backgrounds and many ages. And this is a beautiful picture from, I don't know, Friends 2017, 2018. And these are all, this is our patient council. Matching t-shirts. Okay, so in phase 1 in 2016, when we were funded, we really started to drive a change, as we all did in the SPOR world at that time, in how to do research with all of our stakeholders at the table. Along with that work, we were generating new knowledge about kidney disease and care through our 3 themes of the network, which our 18 research projects fell under: earlier diagnosis of chronic kidney disease, better treatments, and innovative care. In addition, we were working on infrastructures that would help create a more sustainable structure for this kind of engaged, collaborative, participatory research going forward. So one of those infrastructures is the learning tree. We also have the Canadian Nephrology Trials Network, as well as KidneyLink. Moving now into phase 2, woo! We're going to take what we've learned and we're going to implement it now through the conduction of implementation science projects to mobilize, sustain, and upscale the interventions from phase 1. We're looking to continue to advance our indigenous cultural competency. We want to diversify the kidney research environment by addressing EDI principles. And important to this group today, it's all important, but we also want to, continue to support and build capacity for sustainable patient-oriented research. Although I'm not sure how we could ever turn back. Next slide. So this is pillar 4. This is the learning tree. The idea is to develop additional educational resources to enhance training. So yes, we have been doing this for a while. Yes, we're definitely further along in our knowledge base from where we were, back in 2016, but there's always room to support and grow. And we're going to talk a little bit more about our learning tree. So we have 5 branches, and the idea of the branches came from lots of dialogue from our training and mentorship committee, that you'll see on the next slide. The idea was that we would survey the network to see where were the gaps in knowledge around in doing patient-oriented research. And so the top 5 survey results are represented here in each of the learning branches. And our tree is rooted in the core values of respect, reciprocity, relevance, relationships, and reflection. Next slide. So the Training and Mentorship Committee, or TMC, consists of researchers, patient partners, Indigenous partners, and network staff. And we gathered annually, typically in Montreal, to, because we're a national network, it's really important to have those in-person meetings. And we had so much rich conversation, creativity, and dialogue in those in-person meetings. And it was really here where the learning tree, got its roots. Again, assessing the network in 2017 to come to understand what the training needs are of our members. And then the work was set to develop these learning branches. So this is what we've ended up with our learning tree. We have the Wabishki, Bizhiko, Skaanj learning pathway, storytelling for impact, KidneyPro, our patient engagement toolkit, and our knowledge translation principles. And we're going to go over each of them with you now. Oh, but before, a little plug. We have a whole paper on it. You can go read more about this beautiful process the TMC engaged in your holiday leisure time. Now I think I'm handing it over. Yes, Alicia.
Thanks, Leah. So my name is Alicia Murdoch. I'm a project manager here at Can-SOLVE CKD. And today I have the pleasure of introducing you all to our KidneyPro module. So next slide. So KidneyPro is our online self-directed, so just at your own pace, learning module that was created by a group of our Can-SOLVE CKD team members, researchers, and patient partners to help patients understand foundational aspects of research in Canada, with a focus obviously on kidney research. It aims to support patient engagement studies by empowering patients to take part actively and meaningfully in research. And there are integrated quizzes, which we hope you find engaging to help affirm your understanding of the key points from the module. And our hope is really that this module will equip learners with an introductory understanding of research and the role that they can play either as a participant or as a patient partner. Next slide. So there are 3 broad topics within the module: research landscape, patient engagement in research, and going forward. The research landscape section outlines the types of research that are funded by the federal government, the research process, as well as describing some of the types of kidney research that is conducted. The patient engagement section focuses on describing the patient roles, whether it be as a participant, which is the traditional trial way that most research has been done, or as a patient partner, and as well as describes the difference between those roles. So Indigenous peoples are disproportionately affected by chronic kidney disease, but historically underrepresented in the research. So we added the Indigenous patient partnership section to highlight some key moments in the history of colonization and how it has affected Indigenous populations in Canada, as well as the barriers that affect their medical care and ways to respectfully integrate Indigenous perspectives and patient partners into the research. And the final section going forward offers learners links to other resources as well as sites to help them explore ways to get involved in research and find research opportunities. Next, I'm going to show you a screenshot of one of the module pages. We've tried to make it as engaging as possible to make it, fun to learn with some flip cards and little pop-ups and things like that, as well as some short video testimonials from some of our patient partners. If you click here, we'll see there's a little scroll thing down there, so you can look at a glance at all of the topics. Next, you can also see, we'll show you how much you've completed, that little bar there, so you can see how far you've come. As you go through each lesson, you'll see that the rings will start to fill up, and eventually when you finish that section, a little check mark will show up. And then at the top, we have a little search function. So if there's something that you read about and at the end you want to go back and revisit it, you can just search up a term or a phrase in there and it'll find it for you. Finally, at the end of, next slide. At the end of the module, we ask that you complete a short evaluation just so that we can continue to improve the module. This is something that we did make in-house within Can-SOLVE CKD, and we do have the ability to, improve upon it because we want to make it as useful as possible so that we can get more people feeling comfortable with being involved in research. And once you complete your evaluation, you'll get a lovely certificate of completion that you can download and save. The module can take up to 90 minutes. It all depends on how fast of a reader you are, I guess, and how some people like to go through and really read and absorb. Also, you can come back to it. So you could do a section, once a week or so, and then go back and revisit it and really take your time with the module. So you can come back and revisit it. You can also revisit to seek out resources or the other learning opportunities. So that's our KidneyPro module, and I hope that I've given you enough information that you want to go check it out for yourself and find it valuable. Thanks.
Thanks, Alicia. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Selena Alu. I'm the Knowledge Translation Broker and Implementation Support Practitioner for Can-SOLVE CKD, as well as for the Division of Nephrology here at the University of Calgary. So I'd just like to acknowledge that I'm living in the traditional territories of the people of Treaty 7 in Southern Alberta. And the city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. I'd like to give thanks to all the Indigenous people who have helped us steward this land, as well as honor and celebrate this place. Next slide, please. Okay, so today what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a little bit about our knowledge translation branch. As Leah mentioned, it is one of 5 branches, and it's basically dedicated to enhancing the understanding and the importance of knowledge translation. So a little refresher on what knowledge translation is before I dive into my presentation. So knowledge translation is the synthesis, the exchange, the dissemination, and the application of knowledge to improve health, the healthcare system, and health service delivery. So you could see that it's basically made up of 4 processes. Knowledge synthesis is where total evidence is considered rather than the results of just a single study. Knowledge exchange is where the producers and the users of knowledge come together and they impart knowledge and learn from each other. Dissemination refers to the different ways that we communicate and share our research findings, and knowledge application is about putting research into practice, and this is often referred to as implementation. Next, please. So the knowledge translation module that we developed is entitled How to Distill Key Messages from an Academic Publication and Communicate Using Plain Language. So this module basically brings together two different concepts: how to find key messages when you're reading an academic publication, and then how to take those key messages and communicate them using plain language. So this module essentially speaks to process number 3 that I spoke of a little bit earlier, which is dissemination. What I'm going to tell you about today are really focused on 3 things. I'll tell you what the E module is about, who would want to use it, and what skills you can gain as a learner if you take this module. Next slide, please. One of the most common ways that we share research findings is through peer-reviewed publications. But not everyone has access to these papers, nor are they able to understand the content or what the findings might mean for them. So what this module really does, it helps you as a learner think about what needs to be communicated when you read an academic publication, to whom those results will be meaningful, and for what purpose. Next slide, please. So the KT module is essentially a self-paced interactive online module that was developed on a platform called Articulate 360. There are no live videos and there are no prerequisites in order to take this module. The module was co-developed in collaboration with patient partners and content experts from the knowledge translation and communications world. You can take this module at any time and take it as many times as you want. It can be accessed from anywhere. And by that, I mean you could access the module if you have a computer, a laptop, a tablet, or even a smartphone. Again, depending on how long it takes you to go through the content and to do some of the exercises, the module can take anywhere between 30 to 45 minutes to complete. Next slide. There are essentially 10 lessons or 10 sections. The first lesson is really the introduction to the module, and then lessons 2, 3, 4, and 5 cover 4 foundational topics. So it kind of gives you the baseline for thinking about how you can use these skills. We talk about what knowledge translation is, why it is important, what is effective communication, how to summarize these key messages, and then how to write those sentences out using plain language. In lesson 6, you get to refer to an actual publication that we provide and practice what you've learned in the previous lessons. Lesson 7 and 8 really show you how to use 2 different techniques on how you can summarize or distill key messages. Throughout this module, we have provided several options and opportunities for learners to interact with the content. So very similar to what Alicia mentioned earlier. So you're going to enjoy clicking on the content and clicking on expanding tabs, hotspots, flipping flashcards. So this module is anything but static or boring. You're really going to enjoy working through it. Next slide, please. Lesson 9 and 10 are really kind of the summary pieces. So in lesson 9, you get to look at some additional resources if you want to dive a bit deeper into some of these topics. And in lesson 10, we really ask you to complete a very, very short evaluation. And then upon completion of the evaluation, the learner will get to download a 2-page summary of the module. So you get to go home with some of the key learnings from that module. The 10 lessons that we have designed in this module are designed to introduce you to key concepts while building on knowledge gained from previous lessons. And for that reason, we ask you to complete each lesson in the order that is outlined, as opposed to just jumping to the sections you want. But once you've taken the module, of course, you can absolutely do that. And while we refer to kidney-specific examples in the module, you do not need to have any prior knowledge of kidney disease or any chronic disease for that matter prior to taking the module. Next slide, please. So who should take this module? We have designed this module that would be of interest to anyone who is interested in learning the following skills: how to critically read and appraise an academic or scientific publication, how to find key messages, so who needs to hear what, how to identify target audiences, right? So who can benefit from reading key messages, and then how to effectively communicate. And by that, I mean, it's really important that we learn to tailor our messages to different audiences. This is a great module to share with your patient partners if you want them to learn a very practical skill that they can apply in the work that they're doing to support your research projects. Next slide, please. What skills can you gain after taking this module? Well, for starters, you're going to learn how to communicate information in a clear and concise way. You'll gain a practical understanding of knowledge translation, as well as tips that will help you improve your writing, right? Like, this is something we can all benefit from. Again, it's really important when we are writing to write in plain language, because we can all benefit from that. So in this module, not only will you learn how to write in plain language, but by doing so, this will help you connect with a much broader audience. The exercises in the module will show you how to identify target audiences and then structure messages around their needs. And then finally, you will learn how to summarize large amounts of complex information into a few key sentences. If you're somebody who likes sharing knowledge or sharing information when you read a paper using social media platforms like Twitter, this module can help you very quickly summarize the so what when you read any publication. Thank you, and I'll hand it over now to Craig. Oh, it's Leah.
It's me again. You'll see me a few more times. So I'm just going to talk to you. First of all, thanks, Selena and Alicia, for those great summaries. And so I'm going to just talk to you now about the patient engagement toolkit. So if you can just take yourselves back to those early days of the SPOR world, 2016, many of our network members were asking us for, a how-to guide to do this thing called patient-oriented research. And I think we all would have wished that there was one, but there wasn't. And we often say in the network that we were building the ship as we were sailing it or flying it, spaceship, sailboat. Okay. So we just tried our best to create tools for our network members in those early days, and have continued to develop things as we've learned and gone on the way. And that's also to say that the learning tree, like a living tree, is not a static entity. It grows and changes. And so we've, are continually engaging with the content. We've got, logic models for each of our branches to ensure that the content stays relevant and up to date, and already have plans for adding a few more branches. So the content that you see will continually be evolving on our learning tree. So the toolkit includes downloadable resources. So it's not an online module per se, like the two that you've just seen, but it's really just clickable, downloadable resources, mostly directed towards project teams, project leads, project coordinators, but of course, anyone on the team, regardless of your role, could benefit from it. So for this example here, tips for collaboration and patient engagement. So we know, of course, that community and trust building is essential when engaging in this kind of work. So just some tips that we've gathered from our members and put into this quick and easy reference. Next slide. So the other thing that really came about when the Training and Mentorship Committee were working on the learning branches was this idea that when patient partners come to the research table, not only are they bringing their lived experience with chronic kidney disease, but they're bringing a wealth of other incredibly important and valuable transferable skills. And so we created what we've called a contribution chart. So it asks, so this is actually for patient partners in particular, but I think I would also challenge us to think about, how might other project team members engage in this contribution chart so that it can really help teams map out what skills are around the table here beyond, what our traditional role and with our hats on. Next slide. So then the idea is once we know where the skills are around the table, how do we map those onto the various stages of the research process? So I'm sure many of you have seen that beautiful circle that outlines the research stages and gives a few examples of what patient partners can do at each stage. So we've basically taken that with permission and created this roadmap, which identifies the research stage and what an example, what a patient partner could do. And we've created the contribution chart and the roadmap to overlap. So there is a downloadable document that you can fill in and work together as a team, which is particularly useful when you're starting out together to be having these conversations, but can really be utilized throughout the research process. Next slide. That's it for me. Over to Craig.
Over to me now. Great. Thank you so much, Leah. So as I introduced myself earlier, but I also just wanted to share that in addition to my role as the cultural competency manager here at the network, I also originally became involved in the network as a patient partner. So I'm also a living kidney donor to my brother, and I really enjoy also being able to bring that experience to the network and to the work that we're doing here. And I'm originally from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Treaty 1 territory, in addition to, the land acknowledgement that I shared for living out here in Vancouver on Coast Salish territory. So just wanted to share that before I get into the Wabishki, Bizhiko, Skaanj learning pathway. And on the next slide here, I'll talk a little bit more about what the pathway is. So it has been designed to enable research team members and network members to build culturally safe and respectful partnerships with Indigenous peoples their communities in health research. And with this image here, the logo that's on here, there's a story that goes along with the learning pathway name. And I just wanted to address that this logo was designed by one of our IPERC members' daughters. So Dr. Malcolm King's daughter, Jesselyn King's a graphic designer, and she helped us to show how that vision for the name came to life. And Elder Dan Thomas is the person who was able to provide us with this name through ceremony. And one of the highlights of this ceremony was captured as well in this logo is that one hoof that is in the logo is uprooting. So Dan said that this horse in the vision was digging at a root, and that root represents racism. And so that's also a part of this building culturally safe partnerships, is being able to address racism and specifically Indigenous specific racism. And so this image helps to capture a little bit of those teachings that were shared with us, and the gifting of this name, Wabishki, Bizhiko, Skaanj, which also translates to white horse learning pathway. So on the next slide, I'll go over a little bit about the pathway. So these 4 L's here are the foundational tenets of the learning pathway. Originally, Can-SOLVE CKD has a tagline that was listening, learning, and leading. And during the naming ceremony, Elder Dan Thomas also identified looking was missing as a part of that process. And so I think that's the really important observational piece of the work that we all do. And so these 4 L's are now our tagline for phase 2. So looking, listening, learning, and leading. And really it's aimed at looking within to observe and examine racial identities, privileges, biases, listening to Indigenous voices, learning about the history of colonization in Canada and its impacts on Indigenous peoples and their health, and to lead by reflect on learning, commit to taking appropriate action, and to build genuine partnerships. So on the next slide, I'll share a little bit about the learning pathway here. So this is the 7 markers that are the learning markers that are all part of the learning pathway. And they are arranged in this order as well to also share a little bit more about diving into history. And then as you progress along the pathway, there are some trainings that are involved that start to talk more about some of the current realities for Indigenous folks and how to address some of those learnings as well. So just to share that this learning pathway as well was developed not specifically for kidney health, but for Indigenous health. And so these trainings aren't specific to kidney health, and so they can be applied to other research arenas. And with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about each of the learning markers. So on the next slide, have a slide here about the Land Acknowledgement Learning Series. And it was developed to inspire a bit of deeper understanding of land acknowledgements. I know sometimes the nations of the places that we live on can be difficult to pronounce those names. And so with that, I think there was some support needed with some of our network members. And so with that in mind, that was part of the development of this learning Land Acknowledgement Learning Series. And so there's 4 webinars that's also led by a series guidebook. You can see in the pictures here that there's some complementary resources that are included, as well as some guiding questions that are associated with each of the 4 webinars. And so the speakers in each webinar, can share a little bit more about their experiences as well with the territories that they're from. And this really helps to develop a personal land acknowledgement. So one of the reasons that it's important as well is for anytime we're working with Indigenous people, I think it's really good to know the nations that we're working with on the lands that we're located in. And I did see in the chat a comment from Austin for the First Light group that you shared with us. And just wanted to acknowledge your comment because the Patient Governance Circle did also meet earlier this year in Newfoundland. And that was one of the places that we contacted to work with an elder to come and do a welcome to territory. So thank you for sharing that resource, and just wanted to highlight that that's part of the work that we continue to do within our network. On the next slide, I'll talk a little bit here about Kairos. So it's a participatory exercise that builds awareness of historic relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. And I think the real power of this exercise is it really demonstrates the dislocation of Indigenous peoples from their lands, and can be a pretty emotional experience for people to participate. And it's important to also take this training like in the places that you're located, because there are definitely differences in experiences from the East Coast to the West Coast to the North Coast of Canada from Indigenous perspectives as well, on how colonization has affected us in different ways between First Nations, Inuit, and Métis nations across the country. And this picture is from our Can-SOLVE annual meeting in Vancouver back in 2017, and it was a part of our training to the network members, and we had I think about 75 people participate, and it was really a really great opening, I think, to our network annual meeting. On the next slide, we have the Sanyas Indigenous Cultural Safety Training. It's an online training that's designed to increase knowledge, enhance self-awareness, and strengthen the skills of those who work both directly, indirectly with Indigenous people. And it's actually developed through the Provincial Health Services Authority in BC, but there are also trainings that are specific to other provinces in Canada. It takes approximately 8 hours to do, and it's conducted over an 8-week period. So 2 months it takes for people to do this. And within Can-SOLVE, this is also one of the trainings that we have offered to our core staff. And going forward, we're going to be offering a number of spots each year to our network members to continue to, offer as new folks join the network. And some of the research coordinators and folks from research teams are able to contact us to fill some of those spots for Sanyas. On the next slide, we have a 3-part webinar series that's hosted by Dr. Malcolm King, who's a foremost Indigenous scholar in Canada and is involved in a lot of work, especially in the patient-oriented research sphere. And so he shares these 3 webinars with us. And I think the really important part of his webinars too, as you can see in the picture, he speaks a bit on ethical space, which is also similar to another concept that we talk about is two-eyed seeing, is just the bringing together of the Western research lenses and the Indigenous research and Indigenous worldview lenses to bring those two places together where there's ethical space and two-eyed seeing that can be done to continue working together in respectful ways. So Dr. King shares in the first webinar understanding of Indigenous worldviews and research ethic principles. And again, goes into talking about the history of colonization and its impacts on Indigenous health, both historically and currently. And the last webinar identifies some skills for respectful engagement with Indigenous individuals and our communities. And so I encourage people to take a look at the webinars and listen to many teachings from Dr. King. Our next learning marker is the Knowledge Keepers in Research virtual book. So here's a culturally aware and competent space for researchers and patient partners and knowledge keepers to come together. So this book, we did interviews with 11 knowledge keepers, and from their interviews, there were several themes, or what we're calling them, are several grades that came out of the interviews. And really it's to encourage researchers to honor numerous forms of knowledge alongside Indigenous knowledge keepers and to help translate those teachings into practice. And really the goal as well here is to close gaps in healthcare outcomes by learning from and with knowledge keepers. And just wanted to share too that over the past few days, we've gathered here in Vancouver to also create some videos with the knowledge keepers. And so encourage you to keep an eye out for that work that'll be coming to fruition in 2023. And just to build a complement to that book that's been developed. And here we have a picture of the last time that we gathered. The first time we gathered with the knowledge keepers was in 2019. And this is a picture of us together, and accompanied with it is a quote from Dr. King that says, quote, "In regards to involving knowledge keepers in research, that it's important to move away from learning about them and to learn from them, and that knowledge keepers and elders can play a role in that," end quote. And our second last slide, my second last slide here is just to talk a little bit about the fundamentals of OCAP. So that stands for Ownership, Control, Access, and Possession. It's also an online training program that provides a comprehensive overview and history of OCAP and its applications to research and information governance. And just to identify that these are also First Nations principles. There are also Métis principles and Inuit principles that go along with OCAP, but that are developed by Inuit and Métis people. And then I'm sure many people are aware of the Tri-Council policy statement. Chapter 9 identifies research involving Indigenous people, so we include that in there as well, just as a reminder for people to use this as a guide as well when working with Indigenous communities. And our last, my last slide here is just to share the cultural competency knowledge bundle. So I think it's also very good to have additional resources. And so this knowledge bundle is a collection of resources that will be continuously updated by myself and our team here to share some more multimedia used to support folks on their cultural competency journeys. And so encourage people to go there and take a look at some additional resources that we feel are important to identify as well. And I think that takes me through my my portion here. And here's a few recommended parts of the knowledge bundle that we've identified for you to take a quick look at. And yeah, with that, I'll say miigwech, and I'll pass it on back to Leah to share Storytelling for Impact.
I'm back. Okay, folks. We're almost done. This is the last branch we're going to talk about, and then we're going to open up for some dialogue and questions. So if anything's bubbling up for you, please go and drop it in the Q&A box chat now, or you can raise your hand in just a few moments. So I'm really excited to share with you the Storytelling for Impact module. And I guess, Craig, thanks for reminding me. My own story and history with kidney disease is that my mom had chronic kidney disease, and my dad was a living donor to her. And she was also a professional storyteller. And so having the privilege to bring, my head, hands, and heart together to help shepherd this module has been a real honor and privilege for me. So next slide. So here is Kathy Woods, one of our story alumni, presenting at using the story that she developed through the module at the 2018 SPOR Summit in Ottawa as a co-MC. We know that patients, family, caregivers, donors have really valuable lived experience to share with us in the research world. And we know, especially again in those early days, that we often ask to hear the patient's story, but we often ask to hear the patient's story, in an environment that hasn't changed or adapted to receive that story. So oftentimes those stories, which are deeply personal, are sort of slotted in between regular business meetings. Or regular agenda items. And so it was really serendipitous, I suppose, that in our survey in 2017, the network told us that support for helping patients tell impactful stories was a need. And so we connected with some folks here at the London Health Sciences Centre Patient Engagement Office, and have adapted something that they had created for an in-person workshop to fit our virtual environment. And it's based in the principles of narrative medicine. But you've heard enough from me today. So the next slide is just a video of some of the story alumni sharing their experience with the module, and then I'll explain a little bit more about what's included.
The storytelling module is important so that people understand that everybody has a story, and everybody's story is different, and everyone needs to know that they're not alone. Their kidney journey may be different. They may be a caregiver, they may be a transplant recipient, they may be a donor, and so they need to understand that they have a kidney journey.
I was comfortable with my own story. It was just a matter of getting some critical but not criticism feedback to say, here's how you could hone your story a little bit better. Here's where you could focus the message a little bit better. Here's how you can provide an introduction, go into the core content, and how to sum up the message at the end.
I think there's so many tools in this module that really help you to go through your story, to pick out what it is you need to be sharing or want to be sharing, to make your points. We all have stories and we all have points that we want to make, but we don't know how to make them. And having the coaches there to even pull it further out of you by asking the questions, I think that was absolutely key. And it's just so important that we all are able to share our stories.
I felt challenged by the storytelling module, and it helped me develop about 7 or 8 or even more different versions of my story based on who the audience is, what we're talking about exactly, and just fine-tuning it to the group that you want to speak to. And I think that was an important lesson for me as well.
I'm forever grateful for having written my story. It's completely changed my life. I don't know where I would have been in the grief process had I not taken the storytelling module and been forced to sit down and sit still and write a story and then reflect back on it when I did write it.
The story.
Thanks. Great work, Amanda. It's a lot to manage. So you've heard, right from our story alumni, that it's sort of our term, that, what's really meant for them. So the idea is that we want to help folks move from telling a chronology of illness, event, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, to thinking about particular moments of care. And the point that Mary made is the idea is that you want to leave the audience of healthcare providers, researchers, administrators with a call to action. What do you want to change because of either a positive experience that you had or a not so great positive experience? So the module really provides tools to folks to help them start to really focus in on those moments of care, again, depending on who your audience is. And once you have the tools and you've done that, then like Mary said, you can adapt it to whatever audience you've been asked to speak to. So the format of this, when we originally started rolling this out within the network, it was a small cohort of about 4 or 5 patient partners with Selena and myself as facilitators with other patient partners who had done it. So the idea is that we're sort of training the trainer to become story coaches, to give that peer feedback that we heard was so valuable. So we've done this sort of in-person cohort version 3 or 4 times now in the network. And then we started to get little knocks on our door about when people heard that there was this cool thing that we were doing. And so we have now, as of today, hot off the press, live within the last hour, launched an online version that is asynchronous. So anyone now can access the content of the Storytelling for Impact module. So excited to be able to offer this resource for those who are not able to come to the live online workshops. So the idea is that as things are always evolving, is that we are going to now, we have this online module, but we heard in the videos the importance of the story coaches, getting that feedback from other patients who have written their story. So the early part of 2023, what we're hoping to launch is sort of like a connect with a coach button to the online module. so that we can connect those who are going through the asynchronous module with one of our story alumni who are going to become story coaches. And then we can start to build a beautiful networking community of storytellers within and beyond our network. Next slide. And this is just a quick snapshot, so it's in the same platform. So you can just really clearly see here the learning outcomes of the storytelling for impact, but we'll leave that piece now because it's live and you can go check it out for yourself. So that moves us into the question and answer part of our webinar as we close off.
Yeah, I'll be moderating the questions. I don't see any questions right now. I did want to add, since Leah said that, late breaking and all that, is that we continue to be open to learning about where the gaps are, determining where gaps are, to be able to continually add and add new training opportunities. And I think that with the launch of the National Training Entity, I think this is a great time to do that. Amanda has a poll that she would like to launch. Just one question. We're just interested in knowing which learning branch are you most interested in learning about. So I'll let everybody do that. And while you answer the question, I will also say that we have this tree is a sapling, I will say. I don't know if that's the correct term because I'm more of a human biologist than an ecologist, but it is a young tree with currently 5 branches that we hope to continue to expand. In some of my work, I am currently, we're in development with Canadian Foundation of Canada and the Canadian Donation Transplantation Research Program to create a learning module that would be to support patient partners as in peer review, in the peer review process. So that's going to be coming next year. But yes, like I said, we're always trying to grow this tree, making it bigger and larger, and being able to connect with the National Training Entity as more learning opportunities come along. Look at that, Craig. 55% of the people want to know more about Wabishki, Bizhiko, Skaanj. So I hope everybody grab some of the links while they could. If not, they're all on our website, can-solve-ckd.ca. Oh, we've got some questions. So I know we have 5 minutes, so I'll try and get through some of these. Can you describe the roles patients played in developing these resources? What were they able to bring to the table? I'll speak first, unless Leah wants to talk also, or anybody else wants to speak up. I was going to say that we always have patient partners on the panels, on the groups to create these things. So with with KidneyPro, there were several patient partners in there. And they bring, like Leah mentioned, they bring such a wealth of information. People have jobs, obviously people have careers and things and experiences outside of their lived experience in the medical field. And so people are coming with us with design ideas, people who are writers and can help with the content. So it's a really cool, once you get to know people, to learn what roles they can have and how they can support you, rather than just saying, yes, this is what we need to know, or I like this picture or something. I don't know if there's anything anybody else would like to add to that. Okay.
Sure. Yeah, I'll add something. I think too, specifically for the Wabishki, Bizhiko, Skaanj learning pathway, that there were three members of IPERC. So Helen Robinson Settee, and Dr. Barry LaValle and Dr. John McGavick were the ones who kind of brainstormed and developed the idea for the learning pathway and some of those markers. And so they were the ones who brought that forth as well to the training and mentorship committee. And then that's where we were able to talk more about the development of that. So that's how patient partners really led some of the work for the learning pathway. And a number of patient partners have also been involved in the training and mentorship committee. So their feedback was involved in the development of the learning pathway and some of the other learning modules as well throughout this work. And so I think that's specifically for Indigenous training and Indigenous knowledge. That's a really important part of hearing from patient partner perspectives, and also, you know, Indigenous scholars and allies. And so that's what I want to share about the learning pathway portion.
Leah, did you have anything to add?
No, just Craig said it. There were patients involved in the training mentorship committee, and each working group for each branch had several patients and researchers involved in co-creating it.
Okay, great. There was another question: are there plans to develop additional modules in the future? So as I said, yes, I'm in the development right now, patient partners and peer review module, and we'll be continually surveying our network to try to understand where some of the gaps are in terms of training, where the need is, and then developing more as they come along. And there was one last question. How are you evaluating the uptake and success of these resources? And I don't know, Selena, if you wanted to say a few words about that.
Thanks, Alicia. That was a great question. I'm not sure if Graham is on the line, but Graham, feel free to chime in as well. So, of course, we're tracking usage using, you know, online metrics analytics through the platform. The evaluations that you will fill out when you complete the modules would be exceptionally helpful. So I can't stress enough how important that piece is. We can track people revisiting the module, number of downloads, things like that, you know, the usual metrics that we look for. Additionally, I think the one thing that we are hoping people would feel much more inclined to do is to connect with us informally and perhaps provide some testimonials of their personal experiences, right? Like sometimes people just want to connect with somebody at Can-SOLVE, somebody who is part of the development of these modules. So I think that is a great way to measure success and for us to keep track of, you know, who our graduates are, you know, how often they're using the module. So I think that would be an excellent way to capture some of the successes. Graham, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Evaluation is a work in progress. I think we can say, nothing to add. Okay, with that, we are at the top of the hour. So I guess I'll just give a final thank you to everybody who took the time today to come to listen to what we have to say and to learn about our learning tree. The link is up there. And don't forget, you can sign up for our newsletter so you can hear about all the late breaking news and hear the opportunities first. So with that, I'll say thank you very much, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.